We have 5 to 10 minutes for questions, and let me put up some pretty picture for the webcast if it's back up yet, but I bet if they cut a cable, it is not. And we've got one right here in the front row. Let's see if I can. There it's on. And if you can say who you are and where you're from, that'd be great.
I'm Ben Gotchel from Bold, Nebraska, and we are not quite beyond Keystone yet, but that's kind of the nature of my question. A lot of folks talked about the availability of the ERPs, the emergency response plans, and worst-case scenario information availability for existing pipelines for the people that live near those. That's important, I agree. But in regards to the local and state level planning and zoning and siting things that we're dealing with in Nebraska right now, how important is that information, the ERPs and the worst case scenarios, for local, county, rural fire departments? You know, these are remote areas where we're a long way from a lot of resources. How important is that information for those people before construction?
Anybody want to take that one? Sounds like maybe a Harold or a Sean question. But you can have my seat up there, Harold, if you want.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'd have to have an offline with you. I'd love to, because I think there's some issues that you bring up that I think are a little hard to address in this group. You know, there's some things that the regulations require, and they have to meet those regulations from our standpoint, what we require. Public awareness is not required until the pipeline's put in service. So, you know, those things don't come about until that line goes in service. So you're talking about the pre-stuff, which is really how the operator does or the builder of the line does their communications and process. And we don't have anything that requires that kind of stuff, that process. So I'd be happy to talk to you later. Okay?
And I might mention there's a session at 3:15 this afternoon that's going to talk about new pipelines and expansions and all of that, and whether there's a need for maybe a change in the regulations regarding some of that upfront stuff. Other questions? Oh, we got all kinds of people waving at us.
Thanks, Carl. I'm Jeff Insko. I'm a landowner from Michigan. My question's for Sean. The measures that you describe are marvelous, commendable. I'm very impressed. And while it's not your responsibility, my question is, how do you get your industry peers to follow you and to take similar measures? Because, you know, when they don't, your measures go unnoticed. It reflects poorly on you. So how can you help us, who are dealing with other pipeline companies, to get them to sort of follow suit and take the kinds of measures and the listening as an ethos that you guys are putting in place?
There we go. Okay. Thanks for the question. I was just talking to Beth this morning in the front row here about that very point. I will say this, and I say this sincerely. Our industry is very collaborative. We're competitors, but we also realize we are interconnected. And whether it's in Arkansas or in Ohio, one incident affects us all. And through our industry, and in fact, we were just up in D.C., about 85% of the mileage of all liquid pipeline operators meet about once a quarter. And the leadership goes through several initiatives, and one of those is around public awareness. And we have working committees. The other thing I will say is we share very openly. And all those things over there we share, and there's things that we've received from other operators to do that. So, and as new members come in or new people come into our industry, we try to make sure they understand the expectation is we will share. We have a big initiative across the industry to actually, in fact, we're going to another big operator in December, and we just meet one-on-one, and all day long we share best practices or things that maybe we're not doing well with each other. Not only on this subject, but integrity, other things. So very open industry that we try to share with each other, and truthfully, we learn a lot from the industry, just not the stuff we're doing. Thanks.
One last question.
Yeah, related to this is, do you, primarily to Sean, do you watch what is being said in the media? Because a few days ago there was a report out of a Corpus Christi TV station that was telling people that pipelines are usually 8 to 12 feet below the ground. Recipe for disaster. I wrote back a response saying that the law says only 3 feet, and then soil erosion and other things could make it even shallower. I never heard back from them. I also mentioned call 811, didn't hear back. They just basically blew me off. It might come across better if pipelines monitor their local media to see for such things. This was not a letter to the editor. This was from a reporter at a TV station.
I'm glad to hear you have some of the same issues with the media as we do. So, to answer your question, we do monitor the media. We live in the public, so we hear. When I go back for Thanksgiving next week, I'll hear about things about pipelines and gas prices and other things. But we try to share that, and our best avenue to do that and educate, I'll say, the public and the media is really through our industry, through API and AOPL. If there's something specific that's, let's say in Ohio, that is centered around our pipeline, we will try and call the media and correct them. Most of the time, they don't do a retraction or even acknowledge it because that story's come and gone, and they're moved on to the next, how they can sell their website or their news media. So, thank you.
All right, one more thank you for this panel. Thank you.